Today is Monday, March 2nd, 2020. I'm broadcasting live from the Dallas County Democratic Party, of course, on Super Tuesday Eve. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, Reverend William Barber, the Poor People's Campaign, will join us to discuss America's moral crisis when it comes to poor people and what are the presidential candidates talking about. Also, speaking of those presidential candidates, some big movement. Amy Klobuchar, she has dropped out of the race. She's actually flying to Dallas and will be endorsing Vice President Joe Biden in Dallas tonight. Also, Pete Buttigieg, who dropped out yesterday, is also on his way to Dallas to endorse the former vice president. A recent survey looks at the top priorities of black women heading to the 2020 election. We'll talk to one of the folks with that organization. In L.A., there's a hot DA's race, and black activists say it's time for L.A. District Attorney Jackie Lacey, a black woman, to go. Also, her husband pulls a gun on Black Lives Matter activists. We'll show you the video and talk to the female activist who was on the receiving end of that confrontation. Also, this weekend marked the 55th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. We'll take you back to the Edmund Pettus Bridge where it all happened, including hearing from Congressman John Lewis, who made a surprise visit to all the folks assembled for the 55th anniversary. Speaking of Senator Amy Klobuchar, a group of black activists shut down her rally yesterday in Minnesota. Also, a conversation with State Senator Royce West of Texas, who is running for the Democratic nomination for the U.S. Senate. We'll also talk with the head of the Dallas County Democratic Party here in this area, talk about how Democrats are faring when it comes to early voting and the campaign. We got a jam-packed show for you, and it's time to bring the funk. I'm Roland Martin Unfiltered, broadcasting live from Dallas. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
All right, folks, this is Roland Martin broadcasting live from Dallas, Texas, of course, where this is one of the Super Tuesday states where folks will be going to the polls here in Texas and in 14 other states and locations, making their choice for the Democratic nominee for President of the United States. It has been a busy 48 hours since black voters largely made their pick in South Carolina. Tom Steyer was one of the first to drop out that night. Pete Buttigieg yesterday dropped out of the presidential campaign. And today, the moment I landed in Dallas, we saw the news, Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, suspending her campaign, is actually flying to Dallas tonight, where she and Buttigieg will join former Vice President Joe Biden at a rally to give their endorsement to Joe Biden. The race is, of course, coalescing around Joe Biden, many of those moderate candidates who don't have a shot. Why? Because all the focus is on stopping Senator Bernie Sanders, who is leading in the polls here in Texas, but also in California, and is going to pick up a significant number of delegates tomorrow on Super Tuesday. Now, one of the folks who's been dealing with all of these campaigns has been Reverend Dr. William J. Barber, talking about issues around the poor, trying to get the candidates to focus on poverty. He joins us right now on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Reverend Barber, how you doing?
You doing, man? I'm in Birmingham in a Super Tuesday state. We've been spending 3 days down here in the South trying to get people to understand that poor people, black and white and others, are literally the political calculus transformers if we can ever get these candidates to focus. And we're here for a big mass meeting leading to June 20th of the Mass Poor People's Assembly Moral March on Washington.
You talk about, of course, trying to get them to understand those issues. I was with Senator Doug Jones in December there in Birmingham. I was there for a National Association of Black Journalists board meeting. He and I had lunch. He told me that there are 900,000 unregistered people in Alabama, 500,000 of them African American.
Well, that is true, but there's something else that we need to look at. There are 1.5 million voting age adults in Alabama who are poor and low wealth. Trump won the last time in Alabama by only 500,000 votes. 900,000 people that were already registered didn't vote. Doug Jones won by only 22,000 votes. In the South, in the 13 former Confederate states, there are 75 million poor and low-income adults. Trump won at his total vote count was something like 23 million votes. So there are 3 times more poor and low-wealth people who registered to vote in the South. And there's not been a focus on that, even though all of these southern states, in Alabama, for instance, 43% of the state is poor. They don't have health. Nearly 50% of the people plus make less than a living wage. The political calculus is really with poor and low wealth people and getting black and white and brown to come together. One of the things I'm concerned about, Roland, is I keep hearing this language, whether we need a revolution or a moderate candidate. Well, in Birmingham, it was Dr. King who challenged this notion of moderation in the face of so much injustice. I think what they ought to be saying, the issue is not, do we need a revolution in the face of the racism, retrenchment, and injustice of Trump? Surely we need a revolution. What kind of revolution ought to be the debate? But anybody that marched across the Edmonds Pettus Bridge yesterday and said, which was a place of revolution, to say we don't need a revolution of values and a revival of our values, it seems to be off-centered in this most critical moment.
But one of the things that jumps out is not just speaking to these issues, but also how do you get them out to the polls? You have been traveling around the country with repairs of the breach for the last several years, starting with Moral Mondays in North Carolina, reaching those people who no one pays attention to. You have candidates, Democratic candidates, who spend so much time trying to get suburban white women to vote Democratic. Then, of course, you have the other Democrats who say, well, let's just keep getting the same people out. The reality is, if you're speaking to those folks who normally are not voting, you actually can run up significant margins, even in southern states. But you got to talk to them. You got to speak to their issues. And you can't just have debates where you say middle class, middle class, middle class, middle class, middle class, as if that's the only people who you're talking to in a presidential campaign.
Exactly. It's quite disrespectful. It does not build coalition. The reality is, for instance, folk came and marched across the bridge yesterday, but did not go in the poor community of Selma, did not talk to poor people in this state. We have candidates that run right past. Democrats are run from poverty. Republicans tend to racialize poverty, and they act like it's some kind of rocket science. What do you do when you want these other communities to vote for you? You go to them. What do you do when you want them to vote for you? Talk about them. You say their name. You call their condition. Well, how is it that you can't even say the condition and the name of 43% of this nation, 140 million people? It is a backwards way, Roland, of running political campaigns to almost say we can ignore half of the nation and then expect to have a transformational turnout. But that also lets us know, just civil rights movement, the movement has to be ahead of the politics, because the politicians will only move according to their consultants. And we have had politicians tell us, some off record and some on record, that their consultants tell them not to say the word poor, not to talk about poor. And I said, well, who's telling them that? Because the people that we're in the midst of are not ashamed of being called poor. They're ashamed of a country that ignores their poverty and refuses to speak to it. And if we don't, we will continue to give extremist candidates like Trump an easy path to victory, because we are keeping the demographic and the number of people in the electorate small. The only way to beat extremism is to expand the electorate.
Last week, of course, South Carolina voters went to the polls. You were also holding your Poor People's Campaign forums. We've been restreaming the one with Senator Bernie Sanders. I believe Pete Buttigieg and Senator Elizabeth Warren also participated. Did Vice President Joe Biden also participate? What about that? Because you're trying to get these candidates to speak to this issue, and unfortunately you have these debate moderators working for these networks who are not even bringing this issue up.
That's exactly right. And we've invited all of them. We've not heard yet from Vice President. We heard they wanted to, but we haven't been able to settle on it. The same thing with Warren. We invited all of them. We even invited the White House, because you can't leave these issues alone, and you can't refuse to address the other 4 issues that connect to it: systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation. Think about it, Roland. Here we are in the South. We marched across the bridge yesterday, but the things that people marched across 55 years ago have been rolled back. We have empirical data that the same states that are racist voter suppression states are also states where the politicians who use race to get elected then turn around and block living wages, block health care, which in fact affects more poor white people in raw numbers than black. Now, how do you have a national conversation and not have that conversation? How do you allow people to come on stage as a moderator and not ask them where do they stand on voting rights and ending systemic racist voter suppression and gerrymandering, and where do they stand on the issue of poverty? If we don't get over this and deal with it, we are going to continue to have a democracy that is weak and anemic in its participation. People talk about South Carolina and what it did. Yes, it was a reset for a campaign, but tomorrow will be a revelation because you'll have more people, you'll have a broader a spectrum of the population. But here's the other question. We say 81% voted, 35% voted. Of what? How many people didn't vote in South Carolina? How many people didn't turn out? How many people are still not moving because they're not hearing their voice? There are 1.5 million poor and low-wealth adults in South Carolina. Trump won last time, South Carolina, about 300,000 votes. There were 1 million registered voters in South Carolina that didn't even vote. We have to have a deeper analysis, and Roland, that's why what you're doing is so important to the American conversation.
Well, I think we have to continue the conversation and continue pushing these candidates. But also, I would say the next debate, whenever that's taking place, go hard at whatever network is sponsoring to say y'all have got to bring it up. But I keep saying this, Reverend Barber. Part of the problem is that the people who are asking the questions and the executive run of these networks, they are a part of the 1%, and they don't deal with these issues. They don't see poverty. Their kids are in private school, and that's why you don't hear it come up, because it doesn't affect them.
It doesn't affect them. And we have, as you said, you told me one time, vaping, 7 people died. It is a national emergency. 700 people died from poverty. We haven't heard yet. We intend to go straight after the networks. We intend to demand that these candidates demand that it happen. If you could change the debate stage for a billionaire, you can change the debate stage for 140 million poor and low-wealth people in this country. We're not backing up. We're going to continue to mobilize. We sent out a tweet yesterday and asked for 55,000 people in every state to get 5 people and turn out to the poll around our agenda. Roland, in less than a half day, we had 300,000 people respond to that tweet. We are not playing in this movement. We are building very seriously white and black together, because the poverty and people who are poor hold the key to the transforming of the political calculus in this country.
All right, Reverend Dr. William Barber, we surely appreciate it. Keep up the fight. We'll be right there with you.
Thank you, my friend. Take care. God bless.
All right, thanks a bunch. Hey, folks, got to go to a break. We come back, we'll talk with Dallas State Senator Royce West, who is trying to secure the Democratic nomination to go against incumbent Senator Republican John Cornyn in Texas in November. We'll be back, Roland Martin Unfiltered, broadcasting live from the Dallas County Democratic Party in just a moment. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. All right, so a lot of y'all are always asking me about some of the pocket squares that I wear. Now, Robert don't have one on. Now, I don't particularly like the white pocket squares. I don't like even the silk ones. And so I was reading GQ magazine a number of years ago, and I saw this guy who had this pocket square here, and it looks like a flower. This is called a shibori pocket square. This is how the Japanese manipulate the fabric to create this sort of flower effect. So I'm going to take it out and then place it in my hand so you see what it looks like. And I said, man, this is pretty cool. And so I tracked down, it took me a year to find a company that did it. And so they make these about 47 different colors. And so I love them because, again, as men, we don't have many accessories to wear, so we don't have many options. And so this is really a pretty cool pocket square. Now, what I love about this here is you saw when it's in the pocket, it gives you that flower effect like that. But if I wanted to also, unlike other, because if I flip it and turn it over, it actually gives me a different type of texture. And so therefore it gives me a different look. So there you go. So if you actually want to get one of these Shibori pocket squares, we have them in 47 different colors. All you got to do is go to RolandSMartin.com/pocket squares. So it's RolandSMartin.com/pocket squares. All you got to do is go to my website and you can actually get this. Now, for those of you who are members of our Bring the Funk fan club, there's a discount for you to get our pocket squares. That's why you also got to be a part of our Bring the Funk fan club. And so that's what we want you to do. And so it's pretty cool. So if you want to jazz your look up, you can do that. In addition, y'all see me with some of the feather pocket squares. My sister, who's a designer, she actually makes these. They're all custom made. So when you also go to the website, you can also order one of the customized feather pocket squares right there at RolandSMartin.com/pocket squares. So please do so. And of course, that goes to support the show. And again, if you're a Bring the Funk fan club member, you get a discount. This is why you should join the fan club. All right, folks, Roland Martin here, Dallas County Democratic Party here in Dallas, Texas. Texas is one of the Super Tuesday states. Going to the polls tomorrow, choosing, of course, their Democratic nominee for president. But remember, it's not just presidential candidates who are running in the primary. You also have folks who are running for U.S. Senate, for Congress, as well as a number of other down-ballot races. We've been interviewing a number of those people, and we'll talk to one right now. He is State Senator Royce West of Dallas. He is running for the Democratic nomination for United States Senate. Senator West, how you doing? So first and foremost, you are, of course, seeking the Democratic nomination. It's 11 folks who are running. And so how's it looking for you right now in this race?
I think it looks pretty good. The reality is that we've been all over the state of Texas. We've got a great deal of positive response. Mayor Sylvester Turner from Houston has endorsed me. Congressman Al Green, Sylvia Garcia, Eddie Bernice Johnson, Mark Vesey, all of them have endorsed my candidacy.
Now, with that many people running, there's some places where whoever wins first place wins a nomination. In this case, top two, if no one secures 50 plus 1%, goes to a runoff?
That's exactly right. And so right now, when you begin to look at the polls and things, I have been consistently second in most of the polls.
And obviously with that number of people, I mean, it's a little hard getting your message out. Plus, this is not a small state. So how difficult has that been trying to traverse this state, hitting all parts to get people to realize that you're on the ballot?
Well, I mean, after serving in the Texas Senate here for 26 years, I have some name ID in North Central Texas, but not throughout the state of Texas. It's been difficult in part because the Senate Democratic Campaign Committee has put its thumb on this particular race. What do I mean by that? Without interviewing all of the candidates, all of the viable candidates in this race, they decided up front to endorse one of the candidates. And as a result,
really?
Yes, and as a result of doing that, they've frankly frozen fundraising opportunities for most of the candidates, most of us being either African American or Latino.
So because, so first of all, who have they, so the Senate committee, of course, out of Washington, D.C., right, they've already decided who their nominee is. Who is that?
M.J. Hager.
So as somebody who has served this party faithfully, and just so folks know, I mean, we're here at the Dallas County Democratic Party. I mean, this conference room we're in is named after you. Surely that doesn't make you, didn't make you feel good that your own party has decided up front who should be the best nominee.
I was very disappointed that I didn't even get a chance to get I didn't have an opportunity to even get interviewed. They said, frankly, that the data looks good for her and for no one else but her.
That is one of the complaints that African Americans have made over the years. I think back to Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley when she ran in Massachusetts. She ran against a long-term Democrat incumbent. That person, who was white, even got the endorsement of the Congressional Black Caucus PAC and other CBC members, even though she was an African American, but she still won. And so let's say the two of you go to the runoff. Are you, I mean, you know, how do you run against somebody when the party itself is saying we want her instead of him?
That's what the Senate Democratic Campaign Committee said, but the Texas State Democratic Party said we select and elect our own candidates here in Texas, not in Washington. And so I think that's going to be very critical. It'll be a point that will be made during the runoff. When you begin to compare the experience of myself and other candidates in this race, I'm the most experienced candidate. We look at body cameras, as you well know. I was the author of the body camera legislation. You look at racial profiling. You look at issues concerning historically black colleges. I've been on top of all of those issues for these many years. I'm the most qualified person in this race.
One of the things that we just had Reverend Dr. William J. Barber on, and he was talking about poor people. And he said, and too many of these candidates don't even want to mention poor people, don't even want to say the name. He said there are people who are out there who are disaffected, who have not been voting. If candidates would speak to them, they could turn out people, and that could be the margin of difference to victory.
Well, I agree with that, and that may very well be, not very well, that's something that we've got to make certain that we focus on with more laser certainty. You know, one of my platform issues is I will make certain that we have a $15 minimum wage when I get to Washington. Yes, there'll be people that'll be pushing back, but in Texas, as an example, the minimum wage is $7.25. Who can live off of $7.25? We've got to do better. We will do better.
Last question for you. When we talk about the other issues out there, first and foremost, when you look at this state, diverse state, and people talk about 2043, but the reality is African Americans and Hispanics in this state, significant numbers. Population under 18 is already majority minority as well. But how do you get those 2 million eligible but unregistered Latinos to go to the polls as well? Republicans control every statewide seat here, but in the last two elections, Democrats have been beating Republicans, especially in the suburbs, and so Democrats are 8 seats away from taking over the Texas House, 9 seats, and so how do you get people to understand that especially Democrats, that they can actually win statewide in Texas? It doesn't have to be a total lock by the Republicans.
Well, when you begin to think about why am I running, I'm running because all of the signs are here. The same signs that we had back in 2006 when we turned Dallas County blue, which is now dark blue, are here right now in terms of statewide. And so I'm running to make certain that I be on the vanguard out front in terms of helping to turn Texas blue. This is what I've been able to accomplish. I've been able to get the endorsement of the Texas Tejano Democrats, as you well know, the largest Latino organization here in the state of Texas. They've endorsed me as their candidate for the United States Senate. The Texas Coalition of Black Democrats, they took a poll. I was #1 in that poll. So I've been able to take those two groups and pull them together. Now, if we can take those two groups, pull them together, and make certain that we pull together a plan, similar to what Pastor Barber said, in order to get some of the poverty population up and out and voting, then we're going to be pretty good. We've got to make certain that we claim their mantle. We've got to make certain that we claim the mantle and move forward and try to get them out to vote, as well as other coalitions partners.
All right, folks, going to the polls tomorrow. You're going to be quite busy. I'm sure we'll be seeing you at the Joe Biden rally a little bit later today.
No, I'm going to be at my own rally. I'm trying to make everyone understand that Royce should be your choice.
Stay Senator Royce West. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. All right, folks. Here at the Dallas County Democratic Party. In a moment, we're going to talk to the chair of Dallas County Democratic Party about what's happening here and what turnouts will be looking like. That's next on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Check out Roland Martin Unfiltered. YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. All right, folks, lots of things have been happening. Again, as I said, the last 48 hours, we're here in Dallas, the Dallas County Democratic Party. In a moment, we're going to be talking with Carol Donovan, who is the chair of the Dallas County Democratic Party. You heard what State Senator Royce West said, Dallas County being deep blue. This used to be a county where Republicans control nearly all of the county-wide seats. It's shifted. The population has been shifting in Texas. 500,000 people, new people move to the state every single year. That's one of the reasons why you're seeing the shift in the suburbs, not only in Dallas County, but in Harris County, where Houston is, Bexar County, where San Antonio is, Travis County, where Austin is. And so voting has been off the chain here. In 2018, Democrats were winning a number of seats. In fact, several Republicans have been retiring here in Texas, including in congressional seats. So right now I want to talk to Carol Donovan, who is the chair of Dallas County Democratic Party. Carol, of course, Joe Biden is coming into town, having his rally here. Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar are flying in to endorse him. What has the numbers been looking like, though, in terms of voting, early voting? We saw in South Carolina, more people voted in South Carolina than they did when Obama ran in the primary in 2008. Are we seeing big numbers here?
Yes, we are. In fact, the Democratic voters are voting 50% higher than they did in the last presidential election in 2016. Interestingly, the Republican voters are actually voting a little less than they did in that 2016 presidential election. So you can see which party is the most excited about voting.
Also, obviously, this field is now narrowing. Tom Steyer dropped out. Pete Buttigieg dropped out. Amy Klobuchar is also dropping out. So you're pretty much left with Senator Bernie Sanders, Vice President Joe Biden, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Mike Bloomberg as well. When you talk about these down ballot races, it's also critical because folks in Texas have been saying for years, even when Obama and Hillary Clinton ran in 2008, there was huge amounts of energy. But once Obama won, he only came back to Texas just to raise money and left. And so how have you been able to rebuild this county Democratic Party, but also in this state?
We have a lot of rallies. We disseminate a lot of information about the vote. We have debate watch parties. We keep that energy going. And for any Democrats out there, we're going to have an election watch party tomorrow night, and it's going to be fun.
But you've also had, though, as I said earlier, 500,000 new people moving to the state. So it's really changed the complexion of the voter in Texas, especially in the suburbs. What are you seeing here in the suburbs of Dallas County that's causing a shift? Because you've got a number of Republicans who are in Congress who are retiring as a result of what has taken place the last two cycles.
Right. They're getting out so they don't get voted out. We have a lot of the folks coming in from other states, like you mentioned, especially a lot of folks from California who are connected with some of these IT companies coming in. And we find that those Californians are usually Democrats.
And also Toyota moved to Plano, and so they moved their headquarters here.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And all these new voters are great, but we're finding that we're having a new surge of young voters and a surge of Hispanic voters.
And speaking of that, you still have 2 million eligible unregistered Latinos here in Texas. What have y'all been doing specifically to try to get those folks who are Latino in Dallas County to get them registered?
We hang out at malls, we hang out at barber shops, we hang out pretty much at all kinds of events to register people. We do a great job of registering people, but the big problem here is getting people off the sofa and out to the voting booth.
And so do you have a strategy for that come November?
We make phone calls, we send texts, we send emails. They're pretty tired of us by the time of the election.
Yeah, I am, because I'm actually still registered in Dallas County. I'm tired of getting these damn phone calls and text messages. Yes, you're absolutely correct.
You know we're working.
Well, I certainly appreciate it, Carol. Thanks a lot. Good luck with of course, Super Tuesday tomorrow.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, folks. As I said, in terms of what's happening in this campaign, you look at the polling numbers, what's going on. Senator Bernie Sanders, many expect him to do extremely well tomorrow in Super Tuesday. Of course, a significant number of delegates in California and Texas, the two largest states. But you also have Minnesota and Massachusetts. In Minnesota, and Senator Amy Klobuchar is now dropping out, hoping to shift her people over to Joe Biden. But you have Massachusetts, where Senator Elizabeth Warren is a sitting senator. And guess what? She's actually down to Bernie Sanders in her state as well. And so what is going to happen when it comes to this race? Are we going to see even smaller numbers? Are we going to see potentially Mike Bloomberg drop out? Joining me right now is Rob Richardson. He is the host of Disruption Now podcast, and also Brooke Thomas, host of Controlling Our Narrative podcast. Rob, I want to start with you. Again, black folks completely changed this campaign with what took place in South Carolina, and so it completely just blew away what happened in Iowa and New Hampshire. Pete Buttigieg drops out. He actually survived only 27 days after winning in Iowa, the shortest amount of time for a person who won Iowa to drop out. He beat Tom Harkin, former Iowa Senator Tom Harkin, by 1 day, who dropped out 28 days after he won Iowa back in 1992. Rob, your thoughts?
Move up the primary
Rob
calendar
there?
away from non-diverse states.
There we
Can you
go.
hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, no. So it's a reminder, first of all, that we need to change the calendar. The calendar right now has a bunch of non-diverse states showing that South Carolina should be up there, and plus other more diverse states. Second, let's just hope that the candidates don't just see black people right now. And now that we voted this way, the first time I remember candidates really talking specifically to black voters was during the South Carolina primary, because, you know, there are a lot of black voters. But there's always a lot of black voters in order for the Democrats to win. Just think about this for a minute, Roland. If Democrats only voted 85% for Democrats, they would still lose every election. So I don't know why Democrats think like, you know, black folks are just some side piece of the equation. You know, black people have to be totally invested in order for Democrats to advance, period. Roland? Well, that's the only part I had. I just wanted to say that it's important to make sure that we do not take that for granted, because, as again, you know, they'll show up to our churches when they feel like it. They'll show up only when it's a transaction, but it should be a long-term investment, a long-term relationship. And when that happens, Democrats will win in more places.
Brooke, your thoughts about what has transpired here as a result of what took place in South Carolina. Seems like black people said, hey, white Democrats, we got this. We're going to show you how to take care of a race.
Yeah, you know, I was surprised that Joe Biden not only won, but that just completely swept South Carolina. I don't know if, I think it started initially before the voting in this kind of cycle started. I was surprised that Joe Biden was doing so poorly in Iowa. And then, so I think I just kind of thought, okay, maybe it's over for him. And he completely blew it out of the park. And you see people dropping out and deciding they're going to, you know, attach to him and endorse him. So it was still surprising, even though I know that Joe Biden has support in South Carolina. But I agree with what Rob said. I wish that we would flip this and start with a more diverse state. If black women are the backbone of the party, then let's pay a little bit closer attention to them.
And I think, Roland, can you hear me, Roland? If you can hear me, and I also think, I'm not sure if this is unique to South Carolina. You know, obviously Clyburn holds a lot of weight. So we have to see, because I always thought younger African-American voters would probably lean a little more towards Bernie. But what happened in South Carolina showed that essentially, you know, Biden won every single demographic. So we have to see, was this unique to South Carolina, or will this be a larger trend coming
folks,
up on Super
sorry
Tuesday?
About that. Actually, give me a second. I actually lost audio there, so I could not hear Brooke or Rob. So if I'm over talking you, I apologize right now. I'm gonna do my next question to you, Brooke, and that is this here. When you look at what's going on, you've got Senator Amy Klobuchar, who is dropped out. Senator Elizabeth Warren says she is going to stay in the campaign until the convention. But here's the deal, Brooke. She's losing to Senator Bernie Sanders in her home state of Massachusetts. I don't know how you stay in the race if you can't win your home state.
You know, it's so, you're right. Like you're like, you know, I don't know why you stay in the race if you're losing your home state. But also, I mean, Bernie there's nothing that would make he could be getting no votes. And if we look at the history, he would still stay. So just because they have like similar platforms, I think it's almost unfair to ask her to do something that he wouldn't do. So for me, I'm not surprised.
What's interesting here is when you start breaking, Rob, when you start breaking down this race, you look at lanes. The reality is Senator Bernie Sanders is greatly supported by progressives. The second choice for the Sanders progressive voters is Senator Elizabeth Warren. You look at the moderates. The rally is the moderates were supporting Vice President Joe Biden or Buttigieg or Klobuchar, to some degree Warren, but also Mike Bloomberg. So they're splitting that. So one of the reasons you're seeing sort of this race sort of rally around Joe Biden is because of black people. The other candidates, you look at Klobuchar, she did horrible in South Carolina. Her and Pete Buttigieg were 2.5%. They were polling for African Americans. And so bottom line is, I think if you're Klobuchar, you're Buttigieg, Tom Steyer drops $23 million in South Carolina. Doesn't even meet the threshold to get delegates. Bottom line is you can't get black
backing
votes.
it up with Juvenile.
You can't win.
Yeah,
you can't get black votes. You can't win. I think that's one, and that's why you saw him drop out. So now you're really left with Biden, Sanders, Warren, Bloomberg. If Elizabeth Warren loses Massachusetts tomorrow, I think it's going to be hard for her to stay in. Now the real question, Rob, what does Bloomberg do? Because hey, he might be seen as the guy who's getting in the way of Biden and helping Sanders, which he says is the last thing he wants to do.
Right. Well, look, I'm not a Bloomberg fan. I hope he does drop out. Just because it's not because I'm trying to endorse Biden. I'm just nervous because I think he is a very bad choice for all host of reasons, and I think he would lose horribly to Trump. So maybe he should drop out. I don't know if he's going to. I don't think his ego is going to allow him to do so. But then this is my breakdown of the party, Roland. I think it's about 40% progressives, 40% quote unquote moderates, and then you got 10% of people that are just going to go with who they think is going to win or who's the most likely to win. So Super Tuesday is going to be very interesting to really see what happens. But I do think Bloomberg does take some votes from Joe Biden. The question is, do all those votes, if he were to drop out, do all those votes automatically go to Biden? It's not necessarily true. The voters are not one-dimensional. Just because you have some voters that would vote for, Warren, and then some might go to Biden, or some might have voted for Klobuchar, and some might go to Sanders. People are not really one-dimensional. But I do think generally there are two lanes. And I think it's about 40% and 40%. There's about 10% that are up for grabs.
Brooke, bottom line is this here. When you look at this, I think it's going to come down to Sanders and Biden. I think even though he's dropped more than $500 million, I think tomorrow, if Mike Bloomberg does not win outright 4 to 5 states, I see it being real difficult for him to stay in this race because if you look at his polling numbers right here in Texas, Bernie Sanders has anywhere from a 7 to a 9 point lead. And based upon polling data, Mike Bloomberg is actually drawing support that will otherwise go to Joe Biden.
Yeah, I agree that it would be difficult for him to stay in the race. I don't know if it would matter because, you got to look at why he even jumped in the race to begin with. Him, Tom Steyer, they essentially just came out of nowhere to just waste millions of their own dollars for these kind of campaigns based on ego. And so I don't really know why they jumped in. I have no idea what would make Michael Bloomberg drop out.
Well, again, I think for Mike Bloomberg, if it looks like that he is actually taking votes away from Joe Biden, and if he believes that Biden is a better candidate than Senator Bernie Sanders, I think that's one of the reasons you might see. And so it's going to be very tough. Again, this is somebody worth $60 billion. He's already dropped $500 million.
Yeah.
Dropping the bucket for him, and so we'll see exactly what happens there.
Couldn't he have put that money into Joe Biden? Mm-hmm. If that's the plan, if that's
first of all,
if that's what he wanted to do.
Well, sure. Sure. Yeah. But you got to remember, he got into the race in November because of this perceived weakness of Joe Biden. But this is also, though, I think the problem, Rob and Brooke, when you make decisions when nobody has voted. This whole thing was about Biden is weak. And let's just be honest. Biden has not run a strong campaign. He has not had a significant grassroots base. No. But all of a sudden, he doesn't do well. And again, if all these people on cable news and broadcast news, y'all might want to watch this show because everything that happened, I predicted. He didn't do well in Iowa, didn't do well in New Hampshire. I said he was going to – this is exactly what I said. Joe Biden's going to come in second in Nevada. He's going to come in first in South Carolina. He's going to get a significant amount of the black vote. And guess what? At least a couple of candidates are going to drop out. And we saw that. And so, again, the problem was all the political media, everything was, oh, my God, Joe Biden is weak. He's failing. But the reality is you can't make a determination about somebody until voters actually vote.
But I think there was so much fear, Roland, out of Trump. The people were just operating in this fear, in this fog. And so I think people were making really bad decisions and just panicked about what was going on. And so you're right.
I don't care. I don't care if you're fearful.
I agree with you. I agree. I'm not.
But first of all, here's the deal. And it was killing me because I kept reminding people about 1992. Bill Clinton came in second in New Hampshire. He then lost 3 straight. Then he wins Georgia. Then he loses 6 straight and wins South Carolina and Wyoming. Bill Clinton only won 3 out of the first 14 primaries. Tom Harkin won 3 of those primaries, and he dropped out. And so I kept saying, Democrats, calm the hell down. You can't make rational choices until you see the direction of the voters. And that, to me, why it was crazy. And so, Brooke, I think tomorrow, again, even though 1/3 of all delegates will be available tomorrow, again, Senator Sanders is going to do extremely well tomorrow. The issue then is going to be what happens on Wednesday.
Do you really see anybody who's locked in right now dropping out on Wednesday?
Yes, I absolutely do. I believe. Look, it's only 4. Brooke. It's only 4 left. Okay,
Warren's
Sanders, Biden, Warren, Bloomberg. Let me say it right now. There is absolutely no way that Senator Elizabeth Warren stays in this race if she loses her home state tomorrow. If she loses Massachusetts to Senator Bernie Sanders, guess what? Her money goes away. She gets written off. I think she's a fantastic candidate. I think she speaks to race and justice more than any other candidate. But you cannot make a plausible argument that you should be the Democratic nominee if you can't even win your home state where you are the sitting United States Senator. You can't do it.
I agree.
So,
do you think she loses?
And I think
you think she loses?
I think Brooks, yes, I do. Brooke, and I think what happens is on Wednesday, it's now she drops out. Now it's 3. Now it's Sanders. Now it's Biden. Now it's Bloomberg. Bloomberg then has to make a very hard choice. I don't believe Bloomberg drops out Wednesday. I believe Bloomberg waits to see the results of Florida. That will determine whether or not he stay in the race or drop out. That's my prediction.
All right. Well, he'd be much better served using that $500 million to register voters, and particularly in Florida where they're trying to keep voters.
And again, I think if you look at his, first of all, he's already said he's going to spend $1 billion no matter whether he wins it or not. But I do believe that Bloomberg and Tom Steyer, I said it earlier, their money would have been better spent if they had hit an on-the-ground campaign. You just heard me interview the Dallas County Democratic Party chair. Look, here in Texas, folks, let me be clear. There are 2 million eligible but unregistered Latinos in Texas. The belief is that 50 to 100 million should be spent over a multi-year basis to move into those communities and get those folks registered. That would fund that initiative. That would fund black grassroots organizations to go register the 500,000 eligible but unregistered in Alabama, to go register the eligible but unregistered black people in Mississippi. Mike Espy only lost to Cindy Hyde-Smith by 68,000 votes. Okay, Reverend Barber keeps saying this. You can win in the South, but you got to put the resources on the ground and go talk to the people. And hopefully these Democratic billionaires see that, because Republican billionaires, they've always put their money. Sheldon Adelson never ran for president. Koch brothers never run for president. But they spend collectively $600 million every presidential cycle to elect Republicans. That's how you spend the money. All right, folks, I got to go over this here. Civil rights organizations shut down a rally yesterday for Senator Amy Klobuchar in Minnesota. The Black Lives Matter activists took the stage, would not let it go. When she sent word that she said, hey, I'll sit down and meet with you, they said, no, we don't want to meet with you. So she canceled the rally. Check this out. All right, folks, the demonstrators led by NAACP and Black Lives Matter entered the gymnasium at St. Louis Park High School, where Klobuchar was set to speak to supporters. The protesters expressed support for Myron Burrell, a young black man who was sentenced to life in prison for murder he maintains he didn't commit when Klobuchar was the attorney for a county there in Minnesota. Now, Klobuchar, of course, ended her campaign today. As I said, to back Joe Biden. Joining us right now is one of those. So first of all, again, that's just what took place there last night. Now, of course, folks, what also happened is it's just crazy what happened in L.A. We're going to tell you about that story about Jackie Lacey, who's running tomorrow for district attorney. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, after conducting a survey of more than 1,100 women of color across the state of Georgia, Pro-Georgia's Women of Color released today their poll revealing the results of the survey, which asked women of color about the opportunities and challenges they face on a daily basis. Joining me now to discuss that is Tamika Atkins. She's the executive director of Pro-Georgia and convener for the Women of Color Initiative. Tamika, Georgia, of course, will be voting as well. What is it that women of color say in Georgia say they want from these candidates?
So I want to be clear. Thank you for having me on the show, Roland. So women of color, it's not just about what they want from these candidates. It's actually a vision of what they want for Georgia, right? That they want to see a Georgia that allows them not just to survive, but to thrive so that they can have whole and happy lives for them, their family, their communities, and their neighbors. What comes to the top after surveying nearly 1,100 women in face-to-face, intimate conversations through focus groups and online? Healthcare, healthcare costs and services, education, right? And, equality, right? That there is a lot of conversation around hiring practices, employment practices that are discriminatory and are preventing women of color from attaining the kind of opportunities that they are looking to achieve so that they can care for themselves and for their families.
What are those issues?
So some of those issues.
What specifically what do they want addressed? What do they want dealt with?
Well, at the beginning, really, they just want to be seen, right? So this report is the first known report that actually got information through firsthand conversations with women of color. It's not based on census data. It's not based on old university data. This is actually the voices of women of color just saying what are the challenges, right? And what are some of their triumphs. They talked about inequity around healthcare costs and services. Georgia ranks high for maternal health, maternal mortality rates, particularly for African-American women. We talked a lot about civic engagement, that women of color, in terms of community and civic engagement, they participate regardless of education level, regardless of socioeconomic level, that they consistently are civically engaged and yet do not feel that our state government or our national government reflects their priorities, talks about their concerns, talks about their issues, and puts them first.
Georgia votes March 24th. What do you hope this survey, the impact you hope it will have on the candidates who are running?
I am really involved and invested in as many women of color turning out to vote, not just in this presidential primary, but in our state general primary in May and our fall election. Typically, about 27,000 women of color turn out to vote in our presidential primary. We want to see that increase by at least 3%. We look at this vision, this agenda, as the beginning of holding all elected officials accountable, not just the ones who are currently running for office, that we are holding their feet to the fire, and we're holding Georgia's feet to the fire, that any legislation and policy that is created and passed in Georgia is to the benefit and well-being of women of color.
All right, Tamika Atkins, we surely appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, folks, in L.A., Black Lives Matter of L.A. is calling for County District Attorney Jackie Lacey to be removed. In 2012, she became the first woman and first African-American DA of Los Angeles County. Her constituents are unhappy with the job she's doing and her refusal to meet with Black Lives Matter. Today, they went to her home to say, when are you going to address our issues? Watch what her husband did.
Right now, get off.
Good morning.
Get off of my porch.
Shoot me?
I will shoot you. Get off of my porch.
Can you tell Jackie Lacey that we're here?
I don't care who you are. Get off of my porch
Get off your
right
porch.
now.
Can you tell
We're
me?
calling the police right
Good.
now.
Good.
Wow.
He pulled a gun and pointed it at my chest. We're here for the community meeting, Jackie Lacey.
Jackie Lacey
Maybe you'll
must
shoot
go.
me in the back.
Jackie Lacey will go.
Jackie Lacey will go.
Well, Jackie Lacey apologized for her husband's actions and explained what happened.
This morning, my husband and I were at home asleep when we began to hear noise outside of our home. We immediately jumped out of bed and I called the police. I wasn't sure what was going on and let them know that I thought there might be protesters outside my house. My husband David and I have been married for almost 40 years. And while I was upstairs, he ran downstairs. I could hear him talking to somebody. He came back up later and he said, there are protesters outside the house. And I pulled my gun and I asked them to leave. Up until now, I've not really wanted to share with you what it's been like. But I think it's time because there's a bigger purpose here. As District Attorney of LA County, I received threats, some of them death threats. I have been followed, photographed while with my family, confronted at an art museum, confronted at fundraisers, even at endorsement interviews. I've had people crash them and videotape me. And all of this is because I chose to do my job. In the past, I have offered to meet with Black Lives Matters, but I felt it should be either one-on-one or a small group. They have rejected those offers. It seems like what they like is to embarrass me and intimidate me. My hope is that one day that might change. That maybe, just maybe, if I keep reaching out, that someone will want to sit down and have a conversation that's productive.
All right, folks, joining me right now is Melina Abdullah of Black Lives Matter LA. Melina, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
First and foremost, we heard you on that video. You didn't back down, but it certainly had to shock you to have a gun pointed at your chest.
It was traumatizing. I've never had a gun pulled on me, and definitely not that close before. I'm a mom of 3 kids, and, I definitely thought about my babies at that point and thought, is this how I'm going to go out? This is not what we were expecting. But, we feel pulled to do this work because our people are being killed and they're not being held accountable. The police who kill them are not being held accountable.
She said that, first of all, there was a community forum Black Lives Matter sponsored. She did not attend. Other candidates did attend. She also said she wanted to meet with Black Lives Matter, but only with small groups. How do you respond to what she said?
So we've been protesting outside of her office for almost 2.5 years, and we're doing so in partnership, in partnership with the families of those who've been killed by police. It wouldn't be ethical, it wouldn't be moral, it wouldn't be true to who we are for us to have private meetings with the district attorney who refuses to hold the police accountable who kill our people. So what we've said to her, and I actually had a personal phone call with her in December of 2017, is that we want the families who are there, who are in front of her office every single week, to have a chance to lift up their children's names. So who would I be if I walked into a one-on-one meeting and not bring the mother of Christopher DeAndre Mitchell, or the sister of Keisha Michael, or the auntie of Waukesha Wilson and the mom of Waukesha Wilson? Who would we be? And so we said, she's a public official. She has public forums in other communities. She should have a public forum in the Black community. And when allies in the Stonewall Democratic Club, which is a largely white club based in West Hollywood, kind of echoed that sentiment, she committed to having a public forum before December 1st. And she never had that. And so we brought chairs to her front door and said, we're here. Meet with us now. Let's have a public forum now. And so, no, a one-on-one meeting, a small group meeting won't work when 585 people have been killed by police in LA County since she's been in office. She needs to speak to each of those, to every family that wants to come and say, why haven't you prosecuted the officers who killed my loved one?
I was reading some comments, and there were people who said y'all were wrong to protest at her home. They say office is fine, but the home should be off limits. How do you respond?
So first of all, we've been at her office for almost 2.5 years. She won't come out. We've written her letters. We've sent emails. We've had personal phone calls. We delivered a petition signed by more than 10,000 Angelenos. We've tried everything to engage her at her place of work. To be very clear, who wants to get up that early and try to catch her before she leaves for work? I didn't. I'm exhausted. But we're at a point where she's up for re-election tomorrow, and she has not had the community meeting that she's committed to. We also have to remember that visiting public officials at their homes is fully legal. Public officials are supposed to be held accountable to the public. We know that organizations like Code Pink, we know that even candidate supporters have had protests in front of people's homes. This is par for the course when you run for and are elected to public office. And so nowhere in our wildest imagination did we dream that a public official would pull a gun, or a public official's spouse would pull a gun on members of the public who she's supposed to be beholden to.
Melina Abdullah, we certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot for you joining us on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Brooke Thomas, I want to go to you first. You're there in Los Angeles. There are a lot of Black people who are not happy with Jackie Lacey. I can tell you that there are other DAs around the country who are not a fan of her. They say she has not been responsive to the community. You have the DA in San Francisco who retires and moves to L.A. just to run against her.
Yeah, and even watching her apology, it was so fascinating. And she's not the only person who is responsible for criminal justice and could be kind of taking a stand and kind of choosing criminal justice reform that doesn't. But watching someone in power complain about being yelled at, complain about people ringing their doorbell, and almost seemingly you're comparing that to people who are victims to over-prosecution, sitting in jails and prisons, when they probably shouldn't, when we've learned from our mistakes decades ago, and everybody who does something wrong shouldn't be slammed with decades in prison. We know that now. And so almost comparing her pain to that seems silly and seems irresponsible almost for somebody on that stage to say, you don't know. And death threats are horrifying and traumatizing. So I'm not talking about that. Just kind of the other things that she was kind of stacking up to this, being yelled at and being confronted in an art museum. It's a privilege. When you look at the rate that Black people are imprisoned in Los Angeles County, it's a privilege to be able to go to an art museum, you know? And so that was kind of, I imagine it would be frustrating for many people to watch. And then also being able to apologize for something that could likely, if you weren't married to the DA, get you arrested. You know, I think that was just a fascinating apology that probably didn't do her any good when it comes to people who are maybe new to the situation and new to the frustrations. Didn't win her over any fans.
Rod Richardson, again, this is somebody who has been under significant pressure. Folks say she is not speaking to the issues there in Los Angeles, has not been a strong advocate like many other progressive DAs. In fact, when you hear the names, when you hear people talk about Black female DAs who are leaders in criminal justice reform, Jackie Lacey's name does not come up, even from those Black female DAs.
Well, I can see why when you look at her record, right? She's not for cash bail reform. She still seems to be in favor of the death penalty. And we're not talking, as Brooks said, we're not talking about like 20 years ago. Like we know it's well advertised that the effects of mass incarceration, what it's doing in Black and brown communities, what we can do better. And she still seems to be resistant to it. I do want to say, of course, you know, just like Brooks said, if she's getting death threats, that's awful. Obviously, there's no place for that. That's always over the line. But look, if you're a public official and you're complaining about people complaining about you, I mean, cry me a river. I mean, you are here. You are supposed to be accountable to the public. It is a hard job. You signed up for it. And she has a very, very important job. Just really to remind the listeners, prosecutors, DAs have so much power. They get to determine who they prosecute or who they don't, and they have pretty much unlimited prosecutorial discretion. So it's really important that we hold accountable those people who hold these seats of power. And so I'm glad people are doing that. I'm glad they're pushing. They're making her uncomfortable. This is what democracy looks like. You're not supposed to always be comfortable as a public official. The public's job is to make sure that you are better, and we can only do that if sometimes those in power are uncomfortable, because we know if they're comfortable, we're going to keep the status quo.
All right then, folks, we got some breaking news out of MSNBC. Chris Matthews, a longtime host of Hardball, is out. He announced that he is retiring, and in fact, he just walked off of the set. Literally. The quote, after a conversation with MSNBC, I decided last night will be my last Hardball. He was on the air tonight. Literally, I mean, folks, understand, this is just happening. I'm getting text messages from folks saying that Matthews will replace by rotating a series of hosts at 7 p.m. And then, but of course, this all comes on the heels of all kinds of things happening. First and foremost, last week, Friday, he confused Jamie Harrison, Democrat who's running against Lindsey Graham, with Republican Tim Scott. Also, there's this video that's been going around of Chris Matthews making, frankly, sexually suggestive comments to women on air. And then there was a reporter who talked about something that he went through, what she went through, where he was making sexually suggestive comments to her before she went on the air. She dropped that column, I believe it was on Thursday or Friday. But the breaking news here, Chris Matthews retiring from MSNBC immediately, and apparently walked off the air, and then they immediately went to break where Steve Kornacki was taking over. Wow, Brooke, this is something. Here's somebody who was removed from South Carolina coverage on Saturday, and Chris Matthews done at MSNBC.
I am surprised, but maybe it's time. Maybe it was time. I think after that weird kind of like Nazi reference, more people started noticing that maybe it's time. Maybe this is best for everybody, especially when you get to a point to where after your network defends you, like hardcore defends you, that you're still at a point to where you would storm off in the middle of the show. Maybe it's time.
Rob, what's interesting here is that, of course, this is the same network that had to deal with all the fallout after Matt Lauer. Also, again, if you look at the previous comments that were made, also that was another person who alleged sexual harassment by Chris Matthews, where the network announced that he had been admonished. I think this is a network that could not survive another scandal after what happened to Matt Lauer. And so certainly, although he said he's retiring, look, you don't walk away from a nightly show. You're making $4 or $5 or $6 million a year on your own. Sounds to me like NBC said, Chris, it's time for you to go. And they played hardball with him.
Yeah, that might be what happened. I mean, there's, one of my favorite movies is The Dark Knight, and there's this line: you either die a hero or you stay around long enough to become the villain. He probably, it would have been better to probably have a better transition. I don't know all the facts. This just came at me, but like, it's a new day. Hopefully, though, at a minimum, there is some opportunities for some more diverse representation, because absent Joy Reid and Al Sharpton, there's not much there. They can do a lot better. I mean, they proclaim to be the progressive station, so it's an opportunity to give others opportunity, frankly. So I don't know enough about all the situations because this happened out of the blue.
Well, first of all, Laura Bassett, a writer with GQ, actually published an essay last week where she talked about her experiences. She previously had discussed it, had never mentioned Chris Matthews. Then she did so. Again, this video that's been circulating of him making these sexually suggestive comments to women on air, at one point talking about actually asking Aaron Burnett to move closer to the camera and how much of a beauty she was. When you see this video back to back to back to back, you go, how in the hell were you actually on the air? Folks, this was the opening line Chris Matthews gave tonight. Let me start with my headline tonight. I'm retiring. This is the last hardball on MSNBC. 7 minutes into the show, he walks off the set. Wow. That's a huge change there. But folks are obviously shocked with this here. So let me go ahead and say this, because Rob spoke to some of this as well. And that is this. If you look at MSNBC, and if you look at Fox News, and if you look at CNN, the only African-American with a show in prime time is Don Lemon. That's it. MSNBC is the leading network when it comes to African-American viewership. MSNBC is number one for African Americans. Yet when you look at their lineup, you do not have an African American who is hosting a 1 hour show, daytime. Well, you got Craig Melvin with his show, but you have nobody in prime time. This is the opportunity right now for MSNBC to appoint an African American. I know you're going to have these rotating hosts at 7 o'clock, but an African American should become a daily talk show host at MSNBC. This is 2020. It is time for African Americans to be more than simply contributors, more than people who are set decoration. It is time for African Americans to be able to get that shot when it comes to these daily shows. Look, folks, I spent 6 years at CNN. I know how these networks operate. And the bottom line is African Americans are just as qualified, just as smart, just as right for these particular jobs. And the reality is it needs to happen, and it needs to happen now. There's no sense in sitting here waiting and saying, well, let's see what happens. No. African Americans have paid the dues, and again, MSNBC, African Americans have rewarded MSNBC with the highest viewership of any network for African Americans, and it's time for MSNBC to have a return on that investment from black folks. We'll see what happens. Going to a quick break. We'll be back on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hey everybody, this is your man Fred Hammond, and you're watching Roland Martin, my man, Unfiltered.
Hi, this is Essence Atkins, and you're watching Roland Martin, Unfiltered.
Hey, yo, peace, world. What's going on? It's the King of R&B, Raheem Devon, and you're watching Roland Martin, Unfiltered.
Hi, my name is Brescia Webb, and you're watching Roland Martin.
Folks, yesterday was Bloody Sunday. Of course, remember on March 7th, 1965, some 600 civil rights activists walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge demanding for voting rights. They were beaten by Florida state troopers and others. Among them was Congressman John Lewis. Yesterday, of course, many people were in Selma to commemorate. All the presidential candidates were in Selma as well to commemorate that, except for Senator Bernie Sanders. The surprise guest for many was, of course, Congressman John Lewis, who is battling pancreatic cancer, almost lost his life on the Edmund Pettus Bridge 55 years ago. At one point yesterday, he climbed above a ladder and he spoke to the people about the power of the vote. Here is what Congressman John Lewis had to say.
It's good to be in Selma one more time. Thank you, each and every one of you for coming to Selma, Alabama. Good to be here with members of Congress. Jesse Jackson, stay safe. My colleagues in the Congress. Senator Warren. And my Alabama Congressperson, Harry Sewell. 55 years ago, a few of God's children attempted to march from Brown Chapel AME Church across this bridge. We were beaten, we were tear gassed. I thought I was going to down this bridge. But somehow, in some way, God Almighty helped me here. We cannot give up now. We cannot give in. We must keep the faith, keep our eyes on the prize.
Certainly, Brooke, it was great to see Congressman John Lewis. Pancreatic cancer is no joke. We don't know the state of his health, but for him to go out there on that day, knowing full well what he's battling, it was great to see. And so many people were tweeting and commenting what it meant to see him, one of our civil rights heroes, stand out there and implore people to vote in this election.
Yeah, let me tell you, Congressman John Lewis owes us nothing. I mean, could you be a better human, But it was disappointing to me that Senator Sanders wasn't there, I think. And I get it, everybody's campaigning, and that's most important, but you have to practice what you preach also. And if a man with stage 4 pancreatic cancer can show up and be there just to inspire, someone running for president and who says that he's the best candidate for all of us and people who look like that very man, at the least you could do is show up to support your colleague. I think that's disappointing.
Well, first of all, again, it wasn't. No one knew until late that he was going to be there. It was not announced early. He was there, of course, Rob, last year in Selma. But many African Americans did say it was glaring that all of the candidates were in Selma in a presidential election year, except Senator Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, probably should have been there. I would have advised him to be there. But back to Congressman Lewis. It's just amazing just to see how much of a fighter he is. My understanding is he has 4th stage. Pancreatic cancer. That's really serious. But he's a fighter. Listen, he got cracked in the skull, almost died that day on the bridge 55 years ago, and he got tear gassed, and he's still fighting. He's still moving forward. It kind of makes it really lame when you hear the excuses for people when they say they can't vote because the line was too long or they had to do something that day, to think about everything he went to just so we can have the right to vote. And when we don't vote, we give our power to somebody else. And there's nothing guaranteed. Our future's not guaranteed. The right to vote's not guaranteed. All that has to be fought for. So he is absolutely right. This is a critical election. We have a president that has made it clear how he thinks about black and brown people, that they are not equals, that he wants to, when he says make America great, he's saying take America back to the 1950s, back to that period. And we're not going back, but we got to fight to make sure that doesn't happen. And everybody has to get up and vote like their life depends on it, because it does.
All right, Rob and Brooke, I surely appreciate both of you joining me. Thank you so very much. Folks, right now, yesterday morning, around 10:55 a.m. Eastern, I had an interview with Mayor Pete Buttigieg talking about the campaign. Then, of course, it was about 7 hours later, and we found out that he was dropping out of the race. I still wanted to play this for you because you need to understand, I believe this gives a sense of why he dropped out, especially when I talked about Senator Bernie Sanders. Here's my conversation with Pete Buttigieg yesterday. Mayor Pete Buttigieg, glad to have you back on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's get right to it. Last night, tough showing in South Carolina. After doing very well in Iowa and New Hampshire, when you look at the map moving forward, how do you make the case for you to stay in this race to win the nomination?
Well, our focus is going to continue to be on the message that we've carried throughout this campaign and that's made it possible for us to reach a point that I don't think any of the pundits would have thought possible. I believe that we can deliver real, meaningful, bold, progressive change, raise wages, empower workers, do something about gun violence and climate change, and that we can do it without contributing to the divisiveness of the moment that we're living in right now. I think that more than ever, Americans are looking for a way to turn the page, not just on the terrible policies of the Trump administration, but on the tone of our politics right now and the divisiveness, the toxic nature, and of course, increasingly also the incompetence that we're seeing. Watching this administration handle the global health pandemic that we're facing is one example of where a moment where Americans are looking to the White House and the presidency to deliver solutions based on facts and evidence. And we've been reminded just how much in our economy and our safety depends on that. More than ever, we need to be offering different kinds of solutions, and that's continuing to be the focus of my campaign.
But you're not. But the reality is, you're not doing well among black voters. You're now going into Super Tuesday. You've got Texas, you've got Arkansas, you've got North Carolina. I mean, you've got states where African Americans are huge. And so, as you begin to look at 1/3 of all delegates will be handed out on Tuesday, you have to hit a certain threshold on the Democratic side, and you have Democratic insiders who are saying, okay, 3 to 4 candidates are going to have to drop out. Again, how do you tell folks, you know what, I still think I can win? What is your path forward when you look at just the hard numbers?
Well, there's no question that the vice president had an extremely strong showing with his victory in South Carolina, and that was largely powered by the confidence of black voters. And I think that's something that deserves to be taken very seriously. Every day we're in this campaign, we're taking a hard look at the numbers, asking how we can make the biggest and best difference. And every day we remain in this campaign is based on seeing an opportunity for us to gather together those delegate numbers that we would need in order to earn the nomination. There's no question that path gets narrower as we go, and we'll continue looking at the math, looking at talking with supporters, and looking at what voters have to say too.
You have been very tough on Senator Bernie Sanders. You have Democrats down ballot who are saying that if he gets the nomination, it will be disastrous for the Democratic Party. Do you agree?
I do. Look, I'm going to support the nominee of this process no matter what. Obviously, I'm hoping it's me, but we've got to come together. Having said that, I am very, very concerned about the position that we would be putting some of those vulnerable House and Senate Democrats in, also people in those critical state and local races, if Senator Sanders is at the top of the ticket. Look, this is a moment when we need to be adding to our majority as much as possible. That means not only consolidating our Democratic Party, but inviting independents. We're even seeing some Republicans cross over, not because they've maybe become liberal overnight, but because they too are frustrated or infuriated by the behavior of this president. And when I'm thinking, for example, we were just in South Carolina, where we have got to make sure that Jamie Harrison defeats Lindsey Graham for the U.S. Senate, where we've got to make sure that Joe Cunningham holds on to that hard-won seat that he flipped in 2018 from red to blue in the Charleston area. I don't want them to have to be in the position of having to explain to voters why the top of their ticket nominated Senator Sanders when we could have nominated a Democrat.
When you look at the issues moving forward, one of the things that really sort of bothered me with that CBS Democratic debate, you didn't have a substantive discussion on climate change, considering how the people in South Carolina are impacted. The Northeast corridor, we talk about hurricanes, you talk about tornadoes in the South as well. And so moving forward, how do you have these substantive discussions about these issues that are impacting people, on the ground, as opposed to having, frankly, another long debate about Medicare for all, or another long debate about stuff that we've sort of heard over and over and over again? How do you make that happen in a race the way it's looking right now?
It's a good question. Healthcare, Medicare for all, obviously an important debate, but there's so many things that we have not explored. Very little about housing, very little about women's reproductive rights. As you said, a lot more to be said about climate change, a lot more to be said about racial and economic inequality and injustice in this country. And my hope is that future debates will be substantive, but as long as the field is spread as thin as it is, I guess you could say we've made progress. The first debate I participated in, 20 candidates split across 2 nights, but still we're seeing a lot of those dynamics, and I hope that the focus is on not so much what makes for good television, but what makes it possible for voters to inform themselves on what I think is the fundamental question of every election, which is not actually just about candidates. It's about voters' lives and voters asking that question: how's my life going to be different if you get elected instead of you or you or you?
Last question. I know you're traveling. You're on the road. There are 2 days before Super Tuesday. There are 16 different places in terms of states and territories where votes are taking place. It's hard to be all over all those states, especially when you look at the economics of that. And so what is your focus? What are the states that you're focusing on where you think you can do well on Super Tuesday?
Well, I've always specialized in places that haven't gotten enough attention from candidates for president or from the Democratic Party, because I see so much party building potential there. And so we continue to try to reach out in places that maybe aren't used to the kind of early state or swing state status. Yesterday we had a great event in Nashville, Tennessee, before going on to Raleigh, North Carolina, both states that are going to have a lot of influence on Tuesday, and where we were thrilled with the reception, and continue to make the best of every moment, knowing that this race is suddenly switching from one where we were a mile deep in just 4 states over the course of a year to, as you said, covering a huge amount of ground in a matter of days or a matter of hours. At the end of the day, it's about reaching as many voters as we possibly can, whether it's in person or over the airwaves, and sharing that vision about what it would mean to turn the page, not just on this president, but on the nature of politics and the political warfare that we've gotten all too used to today.
All right, Pete Buttigieg, we certainly appreciate it. Thanks so much. Good luck.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me in.
All righty. Thank you. Again, folks, that was my interview with Pete Buttigieg yesterday morning, and it was in the evening when he dropped out of the presidential race. Right now, folks, we got to go. In about an hour, Vice President Joe Biden will be having a rally at Gilley's in downtown Dallas, about 2 miles from here. I'm at the Dallas County Democratic Party. We're heading over there right now. Going to be live streaming that rally where Pete Buttigieg and Senator Amy Klobuchar will be there to endorse Vice President Joe Biden for President of the United States. Tomorrow is Super Tuesday. Folks, listen up. We will not be live at 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Listen to me. We will not be live at 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. We'll be live for our special Super Tuesday coverage beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern, going until 1 a.m. We've got 20 different folks signed up to join our panel. It's going to be one hell of a night. We're also going to debut something. I can't wait till y'all see it. But you'll see it tomorrow. And why am I saying that? Because those of you who support our Bring the Funk fan club, your dollars is what make that possible. And so I can't wait for you guys to see it tomorrow. And so again, tomorrow night, tell everybody, we're going to push it out there on social media. I am not live at 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. We are live at 8 p.m. Eastern because I believe African Americans should see black voices consistently through the night, hosting as well as commenting on the Super Tuesday election. And so we're going to have, again, panelists all all throughout the night, breaking down the election results, giving you real-time analysis from a black perspective, an unapologetic perspective, and an unfiltered perspective. We want you to support what we do. Your dollars makes it possible for me to travel here to Dallas, to broadcast live from here, to be able to broadcast these rallies, to be able to do what we do. And so please go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com, use Square, PayPal, use Cash App. Our goal, this is real simple, folks. I want y'all to hear me. If 20,000 of our followers gave $50 each, that's $4.19 a month, 13 cents a day, it completely funds this show. We did 350 hours of content last year. No black website comes close to what we did last year. Not The Root, not The Griot, not BET, none of them. The rallies, the events that we covered, the daily show we cover, no black media company is doing what we're doing. Black News Channel, they launched 24-hour cable news network. Were they live in South Carolina last week? Were they live from the John Legend's Elizabeth Warren rally? Were they live from the Ministers' Breakfast National Action Network? Were they live from the Black Women's Roundtable, the Power of the Sister Vote last week in South Carolina? I rest my case. All I'm saying is this here. We can only do this, folks, if you support what we do. This allows us to remain independent. We've been interviewing black candidates who are running in all these elections all across the country who don't get the kind of time that they get on other networks. We need you to support us. Again, if 20,000 of our followers, I got 2.5 million followers, folks. That's not even 1%. Okay? If 20,000 of our followers contributed $50 over the course of the year, that completely funds everything we do without a single dollar from any advertiser. We need your support. Please go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. If you're on YouTube, you can give via YouTube, or you can go to our website and give via Square, PayPal, or Cash App. Let's make it happen. I would love to be able to say in the last 24 hours on tomorrow, 1,000 of our fans gave to support us. You're watching this for free on YouTube, on Facebook, on Periscope. Look, I got to pay staff. We got to pay travel. We got to pay all this sort of stuff. So none of this stuff is free. The equipment isn't free. But we have got to have our own platform speaking to our issues, and that's why we're going to be live tomorrow night with Super Tuesday coverage beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern, going till 1 a.m. It's going to be a great night, folks. We want you to be there with us, so spread the word. Let's blow our numbers off the charts tomorrow night. I got to go. We got to get to this Joe Biden rally, and so we'll be streaming this live as well. Holla! You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.
Hey everybody, this is Sherry Shepherd. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, and while he's doing Unfiltered, I'm practicing the wobble. Yes, I am. Because Roland Martin's the one, he will do it backwards, he will do it on the side. He messes everybody up when he gets into the wobble, because he doesn't know how to do it, so he does it backwards. And it just messes me up every single time. So, I'm working on it. I got it. you got Roland Martin.
Hi, my name is LaToya Luckett, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Mac Wiles, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's up, y'all? It's Ryan Destiny, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What up, Lana Well, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.
Martin.